Hello and welcome back to the Football Fellowship podcast. Normally right now you'll be hearing my name is Mev, but unfortunately today there is no Mev. Episode 6 is a solo one for myself today and my name is Toby. Gameweek 4 of the Premier League brought us another crazy weekend of football. I know we said it last episode to re-roll that intro. More goals, more controversial decisions, more big games and big results, but it's been the same this week. We've had another goal-filled weekend of Premier League football, which I'm not going to complain about. Where all these goals are coming from, whether it's teams having a really good attacking output, or maybe the teams they're playing not defending as well as we would have expected. Hopefully that's something we can discuss today, break down a little, and have a good answer to by the end of the episode. For myself, this weekend, I was able to watch a lot of the live football, which was really nice. Normally, I'm able to sort of catch the biggest game, maybe the biggest game and an Arsenal game, one or two games. But this weekend, it felt like I was tuning into live football throughout the whole weekend, which was nice. I had a nice free weekend to do so, and it was a good weekend to do so. Really enjoyed watching it this weekend and preparing for today's episode. The game that obviously was most looking forward to, even not just as an Arsenal fan, I think the biggest clash of the weekend, Arsenal, Man United, Super Sunday, 4:30 at the Emirates, and it delivered. It was a brilliant game. It had everything you could want. It had controversial decisions, some really great performances, some maybe disappointing performances, just so much to talk about. So let's just jump straight into it. The first game of the weekend that we'll be talking about was Arsenal 3, Man United 1. Going into this game, I felt fairly confident as an Arsenal fan. I don't think we have been playing particularly well so far this season. I don't think we've been playing bad, but I feel like the drop from how we were playing last season is quite evident so far this season. I think things are still clicking between some of our new signings, which we'll discuss when we talk about the game. I just think we felt not less confident, but there's been a bit less drive, a bit less intensity, and the difference between the start of last season and the start of this season has been quite apparent. The start of last season, we were really, really going for it. Went on that crazy run of winning. I can't even remember how many games it was in a row. I think we had 14, 15 games in. We had won about 13. We had such a good start to the season. And even so far this season, before the Man United game, we were sitting on 7 points out of a possible 9, 2 wins and a draw. But it just felt like the performances maybe weren't quite there yet. I know we had a few little injuries which caused some tactical changes. But yeah, just something maybe missing out. But I think the reason I felt fairly confident was because I think Man United are in the similar sort of boat. They haven't got off to a flying start in the Premier League. That first game against Wolves, I know they got the 3 points, they won 1-0, but it felt like a bit of a flat performance. Maybe they didn't really deserve to particularly win that game based on the performance. They got the 3 points, which is what obviously matters most, but maybe the performance wasn't quite there. They obviously lost to Tottenham, and they were sitting on 6 points out of 9, which isn't an awful start, but it's the same sort of boat for both teams. The performance is not quite there, even if the results are coming through as they are. And yeah, the game kicked off, and it was a really interesting one to start, actually. I think it was quite evident to see that both teams had done a lot of homework, a lot of prep going into this game, and both had clear game plans that, for the first half at least, it felt like they were both sticking to. Man United were really keeping that ball in their third of the pitch. Their two centre-backs, Martinez and Lindelof on the right, were really, really quite wide, not particularly high, but very wide, very well split, with Onana sitting in the middle, Casemiro or Eriksen sort of swapping, who was dropping in to almost make a box defence, it felt like at times. And even then, when Casemiro or Eriksen wasn't dropping in, we saw Onana really, really come out. And it was really strange to see because Arsenal weren't pressing. We're so used to seeing that classic 4-4-2 press from Arsenal, which we've seen a lot this season, and we did still have that shape. We had Nketiah, and he would either be paired by Odegaard or Havertz. They seemed to sort of swap, whether that was because to sort of preserve fitness or to have Odegaard sitting. Maybe he's a little bit stronger defensively than Havertz at times when necessary, but they sort of were swapping that second striker role on the press when we didn't have the ball. And we were in that shape, but it was really lacking a press in the first half an hour. I think the reason that Arteta chose to do that was because Man United's clear game plan was keep that ball at the back, invite the press, and transition as quickly as they could, get that ball up to Rashford and Antony and Bruno, their clear dangerous players, on the break as quickly as they could. And I think Arteta didn't want to be baited into that. I think he knew that would be United's plan, and I don't think we wanted to be sucked in and then attacked. I think we wanted to let them try and progress the ball up a little bit further, win the ball back, recycle it, and make it a possession-based game for ourselves. But yeah, when Onana was really, really coming forward, and I know our press wasn't particularly there in that first half, but there were times where it was clear we didn't know who was going to press Onana. He had a lot of time on the ball, a lot of opportunities to sort of pick out some decent passes, but it didn't really go anywhere for United. That first half an hour, there wasn't really too much that particularly happened in the game, I would say. The only highlight I would say was for Arsenal, we had a decent bit of possession on the ball, and then there was that Havertz miss, which was such a shame. I was so gutted to see it because I know he's been getting a lot of stick from Arsenal fans, from rival fans, and also from the mainstream football media. He hasn't performed super well. I definitely wouldn't say he's played bad at all, but I think a signing maybe of that caliber, of that name, with a price tag of 65 million, I think a lot of people were expecting him, especially if he's starting every week in that left centre mid, to hit it off well. There's been quite a high expectation of him to sort of the signing itself, I would say, as to why Arteta has done that signing. There must be good reason why he spent that money and signed him. But I think we're still sort of struggling to see that a bit. And he had a ball sort of popped up, left foot strike, just completely swung and missed it, essentially. It skimmed off to Saka, and I think it went out for a corner in the end. But really should have done better. And I think if that game had then become 1-0, I think it would have been a completely different game. I think United would have had to come out a lot more, not doing that sort of almost De Zerbi-esque tactic of having their centre-backs and Onana in goal, sitting on the ball and waiting for the press. I think if we would have got that 1-0 lead, it would have been a completely different game. United would have come out, and I think it could have been sort of a much more comfortable game for Arsenal. But in the end, it wasn't. And it was Man United's game plan in that first half that worked perfectly. They caught us on the break. It was a loose ball from Havertz, which again, it was a shame to see. It was another mistake from him, and it was a poor half from him. He was drifting around. There's not been much intensity and not much purpose in his play yet. I think he will come good, and it's very early in the season, but it's been difficult to see. As I was saying, he lost that ball. Eriksen picked it up straight away, saw Rashford making a run and pinged it all the way over, dribbled through, and scored. It was a really great finish off the post and in, which was Man United's. I think it was their game plan for the whole game. As well as Rashford dribbled and scored, I think maybe White and Saliba got a bit muddled in their defending there. I think one of them had to get closer to Rashford. He had a lot of space, and it was almost like he had a lot of space into where he was going on his right foot. We know how Rashford plays. We know he's going to cut in on that right foot. And it felt like he should have been shifted out to the left a lot more. We left a lot of open space on his right, which made it a lot easier for him to sort of curl that into the far right corner. And it was a great finish, and United were 1-0 up. And almost, I think it was within a minute, Arsenal finally got some decent possession. Well, not even decent possession. We had the kick-off, and we just drove and went straight into attack. It was a really lovely move. It was Martinelli flicked it around to Zinchenko into Nketiah back into Martinelli, pulls it back, and Odegaard gets a really nice finish into the bottom corner. And that was the first time in the game that I think we've had space sort of in that half space. We'd had a lot of chances with Martinelli trying to take on Wan-Bissaka, but he was very isolated. He wasn't getting much support from Kai Havertz or Zinchenko. Not that was particularly Zinchenko's fault, but he was doing quite a lot of work in the middle with Rice, trying to keep that sort of mid-block for eventually, if United did start to come out, that we would win the ball there. But that was the first time I think we'd had a decent combination, and it resulted in a really nice goal. And it went into the break 1-1. Second half felt quite different. It was still sort of fairly similar. United were trying to keep the ball, but I think the difference this half was that Arsenal got on the ball a lot more. We had a lot more possession in dangerous areas, really, and we created a few more chances. Saka had a really great chance, which he probably should have scored. He hit it essentially straight at Onana, and I think if he would have hit that anywhere, it would have been a completely different outcome. It would have gone in, surely. He was sort of scrambling Onana, went straight at him and saved it, which was a shame. Speaking of Saka, I think he had quite a quiet game for himself. I think Dalot had a really solid performance. He kept him quiet, but also I don't think we really had that opportunity to get it out to him and isolate him on that side. It seemed a lot of our isolated wing play was coming from Martinelli versus Wan-Bissaka. Saka and Odegaard didn't particularly get many of their sort of classic combos going on that right-hand side, which was interesting because Ben White was also playing up on that right back. We saw in the last few games it was Thomas Partey playing that role, but now it was Ben White, so I was expecting a lot more sort of overlaps, a lot more sort of interchanging, but we didn't really get the ball down that right-hand side. After Saka's miss, and then United have another really good break. It was a flick around the corner, I think, from Ericsson. Casemiro then plays it through into Garnacho, who had come off the bench, and it was a really good finish from him. He coolly put it past Ramsdale and thought he'd won the game at 2-1, and to be honest, I thought he had won the game. I was questioning whether it was offside. It was so close. Thankfully, for our sake, it did go to VAR, and it was overturned. It was overturned for offside. It was a little hop from Gabriel as centre-back. It was that offside trap, and it caught them out, and it worked. It was really good defensive play from him. Another player who's come back into the side is Gabriel. He had a really good performance. I don't think we've missed him, but I think he is a key part of our side when we are able to invert with Zinchenko and have Ben White running down the right back. I think works a lot better, and it was a really good display from him. He did get a little bit bullied at times, though, coming on to Rasmus Højlund, who made his debut for Man United. He came on and he made an instant impact. I was pretty worried watching him play. I think he looked strong, he looked confident, he looked quick, and he gave our defence a lot of problems. Whether that was problems direct, giving him the opportunity to sort of run through and score, maybe not so much, but I think the way he caused our defence problems meant it brought in the attacking players of Man United a lot more. Anthony, Bruno, and Rashford had so much more space when he was on the pitch to be able to do the things that they do best, run at defences, get goal-scoring opportunities. He really brought that attacking unit in together. And I think going forward, he is going to be absolutely pivotal for United. I know I had potentially some doubts, but just seeing that display of 20 minutes just looked like a completely different attacking unit, and I'm really excited to see him play after the international break. Hopefully start up front, and I think it's going to make Man United's attacking output a lot better. But then it came down to the last 10 minutes in stoppage time, and the game completely changed. From a corner, Declan Rice gets the deflected goal. It sends the Emirates into absolute limbs. It was a deflected shot. It was unlucky for Onana. There wasn't too much he could do about it, but I was so happy that he was the one to get the goal, because I think he's been our best player so far this season. Not just because he's been sort of the big signing and there's been big expectations, but I think he's been absolutely fantastic to come into this Arsenal side who finished second in the league last year and be one of our most pivotal players and put in a solid performance for the last 4 games now. Just this game, 88% pass completion. His touch map was so interesting. He was playing everywhere. He was doing that number 6 role when needed. He was pushing forward in that second half into an 8 and playing some really, really key passes. 3 out of 3 area duels, 1 out of 2 ground duels, 2 interceptions, 1 tackles, and a lot of the times he was the one pulling the strings in that midfield. He has been fantastic, and I was so happy to see him get that goal. And then in the 100th minute, Gabriel Jesus breaks through. Nelson nicked it off Rashford into Fabio Vieira and through to Jesus with a really ice-cold finish. He sat down Dalot and slotted it into the bottom corner past Onana, and I was absolutely thrilled. It was a brilliant game. But overall, I think on the terms of the game, I wouldn't say we particularly deserved to win. I think a draw probably would have been the fair outcome. I don't think it was our best performance by any stretch. I think United had a clear game plan going into that game, sitting back with their centre-backs nice and wide, waiting for it to suck in the Arsenal press and breaking. And they did do that. They got 2 goals from it. 1 was unfortunately overruled. But I think it was positive signs for United. I think that going forward with Højlund up top, if they can stick to that game plan against the big sides, and I think against sort of your the lower sides, if they can have a bit more of the ball as well and have both elements of that to their game, I think they are going to be a strong side this season. I think their midfield on the ball with Bruno, Casemiro and Eriksen, I think they're going to be able to keep that ball and recycle it around well when playing against a low block, but also when teams are pressing them to have that game plan of the quick transition and break. I think they will do well this season. A really good result for Arsenal as well. I think it was one that we needed. It was again a game, maybe not the most convincing performance in the first half anyway. Second half we really turned it on, and I think we needed that. I think we needed a big win going forward because we've got some tough games coming up again. A really good result. But yeah, as I was saying, maybe fairly even game. Arsenal with a slightly higher XG of 2.2 to Man United's 1, so a point could have been fair, but I'm not going to complain if we're taking 3 points and in the fashion that we did. That was my biggest game of the weekend, I would say. And let's move on to the next one, which was Spurs 5, Burnley 2. This was also a really interesting game to watch for both teams. I think there was a lot to sort of see in the tactics and the systems that both teams were using, maybe the strengths and both weaknesses of both these different systems. Spurs, really strong attacking performance, 2.3 XG compared to Burnley's 1.4, which was quite surprisingly high for Burnley. They actually produced some really good chances this game. Spurs with only 54% possession as well. We've seen them play a high possession game this season, and particularly a high possession game in the attacking third. That's really where they want to get the ball to and keep it under Postecoglou. But Burnley did well to keep the ball themselves and stick to their game plan, producing 16 shots for Burnley compared to Spurs' 21. So the sort of attacking and chance creation was fairly similar for both teams. But I think on this case, it was Spurs who were really efficient in this game, in their finishing, and that's essentially what won them the game. The game started with Lyle got a good move and a good finish. It was probably the start that exactly Burnley would have wanted. I think they would have wanted to get that sort of early goal and then keep the ball where they can. They know Spurs are going to try and press high and then try and play around them from the back, which we've seen so far this season. But unfortunately, it wasn't the case for Burnley today. Son got the first goal with a long ball over the top from Pedro Porro, which was a really great pass. A little 1-2 with Solomon and a lovely chip over the keeper. It then became 2 from Romero, and from that point on, it was the majority of the rest of the game was Spurs' really. Burnley did still try to stick to that game plan of playing out the back, keeping possession where they can, but unfortunately that is what cost them their third goal. They were playing it around the back, it went out to their right back. Udogie stole the ball from them, played it inside to Maddison, who curled it in with a really lovely finish to make it 3-1. And unfortunately, again, at that point, against a side as good as Spurs, it's going to be very difficult to come back from. I would say that Burnley still had some good moves. They still had some really good possession. They maybe sort of lacked that killer instinct at times, that final pass. But I think for their fourth game in the Prem, they are slowly adapting. I think sort of the last 3 games, they have played well and kept the ball well, but it's been not negative, but I think there wasn't that killer instinct against Spurs, but there was more of that compared to maybe their last games, I would say. They were able to get a second goal through Josh Brownhill, which was another really nice move. It was exactly the football the company wants them to be playing, and it was a really good finish from him. I know it was a late consolation after they'd already conceded 5 and Son had completed his hat-trick with 2 more really good finishes, but I just think for Burnley, maybe playing this attacking and this possession-based against Spurs isn't the best plan. I think there needs to be some restriction when playing against the top sides. I think against sort of the lower half of the tables, the teams that they are going to be competing against to stay up, essentially, I think that's a realistic goal for Burnley. Especially at home, they will be able to have that ball and play some really good attacking football, especially against those lower teams who are more defensive. I think that will suit them well, but I think against a high-pressing, good quality Spurs side, there has to be a little bit of a happy medium. I think Burnley will learn that, and I think they are learning that I know they scored 2 goals, but I think playing the way they are against a side as good as Spurs, they're going to concede goals, and they did this weekend. They conceded 5. And on the Spurs front, they had another really strong possession-based attacking performance. I think Manor Solomon, a name I hadn't really heard too much about, I hadn't seen him play much at all. He had a really strong game. We saw him replace Richarlison, and Son move to the striker position. Solomon, 2 tackles, 1 interception, 5 out of 7 duels. A really good pressing performance from him. But also going forward, 3 out of 5 dribbles, 5 key passes, and 2 assists. It was a really good creative attacking performance from him, and he seemed to link up with Maddison, Son and Kulusevski really well, and I wouldn't be surprised to see him starting on that left wing going forward. They've also got Brennan Johnson to come in now. Whether we'll see him play up top or on that left wing, could see a good fair bit of rotation amongst those 3 players this season. I think if Spurs can keep scoring, it's quite clear that Postecoglou wants to win games by scoring goals, not by preventing conceding them. I think he's quite happy to have that sacrifice defensively. I can see that potentially coming back to bite them in some games this season. I think against maybe not even against top sides, but just in sides where they may struggle to finish chances. Sometimes you do just get those games where the ball just doesn't want to go in the back of the net, or the keeper has an exceptional performance. I think we can still see them conceding potentially 2-3 goals against a decent side, and if it is a game where they are unable to score those chances, I think that's where they are going to drop points. They're playing more of a single pivot, it seems, with Basuma sitting and Sarr having a lot more freedom to move forward, almost alongside Maddison at times. There doesn't seem to be much protection there, with Porro and Udogie being really, really high and wide. They are essentially playing Romero and Van de Ven as the 2, with Basuma sort of sitting. Even Basuma's getting pretty far ahead of them. There is quite a lot of space in front of those centre-backs and alongside the right and left channels of those centre-backs, and I think if teams can get them on the break, whether that's via a long ball or via a quick transitional passing move, we'll see. And Burnley were able to do that 2 times this weekend. Going forward, Spurs 10 points out of 12, really strong start, and a stronger start than a lot of people were maybe expecting, and I think Postecoglou has got his playing style implemented really quickly. Burnley, unfortunately, now sitting bottom of the league. Will we see Company sticking to his game plan, still sticking to that possession, free-flowing football, or will we see him push that back a bit, push their defensive line back just a little bit, keep their passing move as much as they can, but at times where it's going to be high risk, maybe prevent those a little bit. We'll see. The next game this weekend was Brighton 3, Newcastle 1. This was not a surprising result, but a really good win for Brighton, I would say. An XG was very even between the both, around 1.2 to 1.3 for both teams. Brighton with a little bit more of the ball at 56% possession, and a few more shots, 15 shots for Brighton compared to 9. Overall, it was a fairly even game, I would say. I think Newcastle probably started the game maybe a little bit better, a little bit quicker, had some good moves going forward, a decent setup, but it was actually Brighton who got the first goal in the end. I would say the goal was probably Pope's errors that caused the goal as opposed to Brighton's attacking move. Tried to clear the ball and completely mishit it. It went straight to Estupiñán, who was able to sort of fake the cross, move it onto Mitoma, and get it into the box, which was then cleared. Charlie Gilmour had a shot and Pope spilled it, and Ferguson passed it into an open net almost, essentially, which was not the start that Newcastle were going to be wanting. They're obviously playing away. They don't want to have to come out too much. They were coming out in those first 20 minutes, but also being quite reserved and staying back as well. They weren't pushing too much forward. But now being a goal down, they did have to start to come out, and I think we did see Brighton really exploit that, especially in the midfield. I think after that first goal that we saw from Ferguson, we saw Tonali move. He was really trying to get involved in the play on that right channel. Almiron was sort of drifting in a little bit and not swapping with Tonali, but they had some good moves together. Anthony Gordon also doing the same, coming in where needed, staying wide where also needed. But I think a lot of those players moving forward, as well as Joelinton coming forward as well, it left a big hole in that midfield for Newcastle that Brighton were able to exploit for the rest of the game. Ferguson and João Pedro were sort of interchanging who was becoming that the last man striker and that second striker coming off. And it was the second goal where we saw Ferguson really drop deep. João Pedro moved beyond him, and Ferguson picked up that ball, and he had so much time to turn because we saw Tonali and Joelinton pushing forward to try and get something back for Newcastle. And he had so much space in that middle of the park to be able to just take a few touches and pass it from 25 yards into the bottom corner. It was a lovely finish, but again, I think it was Pope who should have done better there. He could have positioned himself a little better and get a little bit more of a spring. He didn't really seem to get much push with his feet off the ground to reach the ball, and it rolled at the bottom corner, and it was 2-0 to Brighton. And Brighton eventually got a third, made it 3-0, and it was a similar situation. It was Ferguson able to pick up that ball around 20 to 25 yards out with just not much pressure at all around him. Newcastle, obviously, by that point, being 2 goals down, were really trying to get something going. And he was just able to pick it up, and it was a deflected shot that went in. I don't think Newcastle particularly played bad in this game, and I don't think it was anything tactically wrong that caused that hole in the midfield. It was just a case that they conceded 2, not unlucky goals, but 2 goals not particularly from amazing chances themselves that Brighton had created, that may be mistakes from themselves. And then Newcastle were able to get a late consolation through Callum Wilson. It was a little disjointed from Newcastle, I'd say. I think a large part of that may have been missing Sven Botman. We saw Dan Burn come into centre back and Matty Targett come into left back, and I saw their sort of average position maps, and it didn't look quite right. Don't think Dan Burn, he obviously hasn't played at centre back for a while. He has been that left back for Newcastle, and it felt like you could see it at times. I think Sven Botman and Dan Burn have had a really good relationship on that left side, and I think that being disrupted caused sort of a wave across the whole team and made Newcastle look a lot more vulnerable, and Brighton were really able to capitalise on that this week and get a really good result against them. Newcastle now sitting, unfortunately, on only 3 points, and it was that first weekend, that massive win against Villa of 5-1 that we saw that got everyone so excited again for Newcastle this season, and unfortunately they have lost now 3 games in a row. I don't think it's anything particular to worry about for Newcastle. I think they still have played well in these 3 games. They've had the game against City where they lost 1-0, and that was, again, I think they still put up a good performance there. Liverpool, they probably should have won that game, but were unable to see it out. And against Brighton today, they didn't play badly, they didn't play great, but I think they probably still could have got a point if they just maybe had a finish their chances in that first 20-25 minutes. They had a couple good chances. It could have been a completely different game, and probably the game plan that Newcastle would have wanted. But Brighton, really good result for them. Really great to see Ferguson get a hat-trick. He played fantastically. He was... you could see, I think, the Brighton players really looking for him in a lot of their play, which as a striker is exactly what you want, and as a midfielder or defender, that's exactly what you need. You want someone to be able to hit and just trust them to either move it on well, bring in other players, or grab a goal, like Ferguson got 3 of. João Pedro was really nice to see back in that side as well. I think they had a lot of good link-up with Ferguson, and they looked a lot less vulnerable this weekend, Brighton on the break, which is something we discussed last week on the pod. They're still playing those 2 central midfielders of Gilmour and Gross. I'm not sure what it was this week that was different, whether Newcastle didn't quite punish them on the break as Villa did last week. Was it Villa? Sorry, I can't actually remember who it was last week when Brighton were getting attacked on the counter. But there didn't seem to be too much to change from Brighton. I know Van der Heck came in at centre-back alongside Dunk, which looked a lot more comfortable. It was a really solid performance from Brighton and a good result for them in the end. The next game to break down was Man City 5, Fulham 1, an emphatic win for Man City to put them on 12 points out of 12 and top of the league. I think it was maybe a little bit harsh on Fulham, a 5-1 loss. Man City probably overall did deserve to win, but by that margin, I'm not too sure. It was an XG of 2.2 to 1.45 for Fulham, 68% possession for City, as we would expect, a lot of time on the ball, and shots was only 7 for City compared to 6. It was a really efficient attacking performance, I think is the best way to define this game. 7 shots and 5 goals. I mean, that is almost unheard of, I would say, to have an output of that volume. 5 goals from 7 shots is crazy. And a lot of that was obviously the robot Erling Haaland. He had his penalty, which he scored, and then his 2 nice, decent finishes, as we'd expect from himself. I think Fulham put in a really good shift this weekend. Again, I'd say it was a similar performance that they had against Arsenal the week before. They were able to restrict Fulham both in the wide areas and in the centre of the pitch. I would particularly say that in that box again. I think what we saw with Fulham last week was they weren't too focused on coming out to the wingers. They were just more focused on preventing the wingers from coming in. They were sort of stepping off a little bit, which worked really well against Saka and Martinelli last week, and it also worked really well against Doku and Foden this week. I was very excited to see Doku play, and he had a few good moments, a few good dribbles, but I think it was just Fulham's defensive performance maybe that restricted him from shining, particularly in that game. It wasn't a bad performance from him, but it was just a solid performance against a really good defence in Fulham, I thought, in that first half especially. Man City were a little bit suffocated in that box. Again, I think maybe Fulham were watching that game from Sheffield United last week where they really restricted Man City's chances in the box. I know Man City did go 1-0 up from an Alvarez goal in the box where Haaland sort of had a half-shot pass and it rolled into him and he finished it. But besides that, there weren't too many chances for City in that first half, and Fulham were able to actually get an equaliser, make it 1-1 in the first half. Before there was the big controversial decision of the weekend, Akanji ruled not to be offside after Ake's header. I think a lot of people have been saying, and I would agree with them, that it should have been ruled out. It was quite clear that Leno hesitated, waiting for Akanji to touch that ball when he was in an offside position before making that full dive. I think if Akanji wasn't there, he probably would have reached it, and even if he wouldn't have reached it, he still had to hesitate, waiting for a touch from him. Whether that would have had much impact on the game, I'm not too sure. I probably still would have seen Man City play exactly the way they did, and I'm not sure if going 2-1 down particularly made Fulham come out a lot. I think we still saw them sitting back and trying not to go too much further down, at least in the first 20 minutes of that second half, which is where Man City did punish them. So I'm not sure how much of the impact is out of the game, but I suppose that's irrelevant. You shouldn't be thinking, how would that affect the game? It should just be a decision that is made. And I think it was the VAR team that actually really messed that up. I'm not sure. They were the ones who decided not to rule it, and the ref essentially had to stick with it. He obviously didn't see it in the open play, and they recommended and said that it shouldn't be offside. But yeah, controversial decisions aside, it was then Man City who were able to grab and see off the game and make it 5-1 in the end. Alvarez, I think, had a really, really standout game. I'm really glad he's had a lot of playing time this season. We didn't see him get too much last season, but he's been playing this sort of hybrid 9-10 role, which has been it's been really interesting. He's almost swapping with Haaland, similar to how I was saying with Ferguson and João Pedro. They do like to swap a lot, whether they're sort of playing laterally, one behind the other, or alongside each other. There's been some lovely combinations. We saw it for the first goal for Alvarez this weekend, and we also saw Alvarez win the penalty, which Haaland put away. But it's been great to see him play, and a slightly different system that we've seen from City this year. Akanji being the one to invert and Walker staying nice and high and wide, and then Foden and Doku being our wingers sort of coming in to Alvarez and Haaland. Man City top of the league, 12 points now. They are looking almost as good as they were last season already, and we saw last season that it took them maybe 15-20 games to get to that level, but I think they might already be there, and it's carrying on from last season, which is very scary. And it could be a season where they run away with it again. Let's see. But I think if teams are putting up a performance like Fulham did today and Sheffield United last week, where they are able to suffocate that box, prevent those high-quality chances where Man City get the majority of their goals, teams can still steal a few points from them, I think. I think it just has to be a really, really solid shift for the full 90 minutes, and I think it is possible. Fair play to Fulham. They put up a really good game, and I think 5-1 is harsh of them. João Pellegrini obviously wasn't playing this weekend after his move to Bayern Munich fell through. He is such a pivotal player for them. I wouldn't say they probably did miss him because he's such a leader and such an organiser, and he's also a big part in their transition when they are sitting against the top teams defensively. He is normally that one to bring it out, find a good pass out to one of their outlets, and then move forward with the team as well. They didn't quite have that this weekend, so they didn't get too many chances themselves. But hopefully going forward, we'll see him come in and Fulham sort of press on a little bit more as well. Apologies to any listeners, but we actually have a bit of an important message to say for this week's episode. It's the quiz.
Yes,
Come on. Back in the quiz. The only Connect Footy quiz. The halftime break.
Yes, and we had an appalling show last week. You got 0. I got 1. After you got 0, I thought maybe the catch-up was on, but then inevitably with my poor football knowledge...
Fumbled the bag as you actually predicted.
I just knew the pressure was on.
Yeah.
Yeah, the pressure was on. So this time I'm going to guess first, and then that way there's less chance of me fumbling the bag.
Nice. Yeah, that sounds good to me.
And then you can just extend your lead a bit later on.
Cool. Yeah. So same old rules. 5 players each. Guess the mystery club. Less players you need to guess the club. The more points you get. 5 down to 0 if you don't get it. So cool. So let's just jump straight into it.
You can do it, Mev. Come on.
You got this.
For all the fans.
You got this.
Okay.
So the first player for this week for 5 points is Felipe Senderos.
Right. He played for Fulham, I know that for sure, and he might have played for Blackburn, and I have no idea where else he played, so I'm going to say Fulham.
It's not Fulham, unfortunately.
Not Fulham. Yeah, too obvious.
The second player is Luis Nani.
Is that just Nani?
It is.
Yeah,
it is. I threw the first name in just in case.
No, I was just like, no. Well, last week I said Juninho, and then I didn't say his last name.
Yeah.
I was just like, yeah, okay.
But yes, Nani.
Right, so Nani, obviously Man United, Senderos at Man United? Because they did have some average players under Sir Alex Ferguson. Okay, but let's move away from that. Where was Nani before Man United? I don't actually know. He was in Portugal. Maybe it's Sporting, or I honestly don't know. I'm going to say Man United.
It's not Man United, unfortunately.
Don't have a clue. This is poor again.
Third player for 3 points, Nicholas Otamendi.
Right, Otamendi. He was at Manchester City, obviously most well known. He's at Benfica now. Was he at Benfica before? Where was he before? I'm not sure. Where did Nani come through? Did Nani come through Benfica? Or did he come through somewhere else? Oh, I'm struggling again. Right. Benfica.
Unfortunately, it's not Benfica. It's not Benfica. The fourth player for 2 points is Shkodran Mustafi.
Okay. It's not Arsenal. Is it Valencia? I'm going to say Valencia.
He's got it for 2 points.
Oh my God, you paused and I was
2 points. Nice. Solid.
Yeah, okay, so Mustafi was he Valencia, Everton, Valencia, Arsenal?
Something like that. I can't quite remember. Yeah, he was at Everton for a little bit.
Okay.
But yeah, Valencia, his most recent club for Arsenal. Otamendi, the same.
Yeah.
Valencia before Man City.
Yeah.
And Nani, I think he was at Lazio or something for a bit, and maybe the Turkish league, and then he went to Valencia. He had a bit of like a regen sort of little spell there.
Yeah.
And then Senderos, I can't even remember when he was there. He was maybe played like 7 or 8 games for them just randomly one season.
Okay. Yeah.
So
had no chance.
Just a name I recognised, and he played a few games there. So.
Yeah. Name I immediately recognised as well. Him and Some centre back from Scandinavia, beginning with H.
Oh,
Hoyland.
Hangeland. Hangeland. Yeah, he was like
Breda Hangeland.
6'7" or something, wasn't he?
Yeah, hit those two under Martignol. Yeah.
I feel like he had an absolute rocket of a shot on him. I don't know if he ever scored any bangers, but I just feel like I just feel like I really remember him.
No, yeah, just
being
82 rated on FIFA. Yeah,
nice.
I remember that. A FIFA.
Yeah, so that's 2 points for you. So that puts it to 10-10 as it stands. I've got a game in hand.
If you get 2 zeros in a row.
Oh God, no! If I do, I think I'd have to forfeit.
Okay, well, we'll see. There's still time. You ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, so your first player for 5 points is Javier Manquillo.
Okay, Manquillo. He played for... Did he play for Liverpool? Or have I just pulled that out of nowhere? Manquillo, I definitely recognise him. I'm pretty sure he's a fullback. What other Spanish club could he... Oh, I think he played for Newcastle as well, actually, Manquillo. Maybe that's what I'm thinking of. I'm going to go for Newcastle.
It is incorrect.
Okay.
Second player for 4 points, Andy Cole.
Okay, Andy Cole. Obviously, most well known for United. But he also did play for Newcastle, so that was good. I kind of got that out of the way. And I'm pretty sure did he play for Villa as well? I only know Villa and United, and I think United's quite obvious, so I'm going to go for Aston Villa.
You are incorrect. Your third player for 3 points is Rory Delap.
Rory Delap. Oh, surely it can't be Stoke. Or maybe it is. Manquillo. Maybe Manquillo. He definitely played in the Premier. Maybe it wasn't for Newcastle. Maybe it was for Stoke or Sunderland or something. Now I've got a picture of him in a red and white striped shirt. But is that just the Delap influence into my brain? Delap may have played for Man City as well, actually. And I think Andy Cole did, because his son plays for Man City. Yeah, Delap's son plays for Man City. Manquillo. Let's go for Man City.
It's incorrect.
Oh, no.
So for 2 points, your fourth player is Jermaine Defoe.
Okay, he definitely played for Sunderland, obviously, but he's played for everyone. Portsmouth, Tottenham. I don't know if he did play for Stoke. QPR. Which Andy Cole could have played for and Delap could have played for. I don't think he played for Stoke, Jermaine Defoe. Where else has he been? He's also been in Rangers. So it's Andy Cole. Oh, God. Andy Cole's the one throwing me off because I feel like I should definitely recognise clubs he's played for because he's scored so many goals in the Prem. Delap. At the moment, it's like Sunderland or QPR. Did Delap ever play for QPR? QPR.
It's incorrect.
No.
I think you'll get this.
Okay.
So your fifth player for 1 point is Lee Cattermole.
Okay, so that is Sunderland, isn't it? Or is it Stoke? Or am I being really stupid? Oh, I'm in my own head now. I'm pretty surely that is Sunderland. Lee Cattermole. God, this is appalling. Defoe definitely played for Sunderland. Did Defoe play for Stoke? I'm going to go Sunderland.
You are correct.
Thank God for that. Bloody hell. Oh.
You had the right coloured jersey, but it's the wrong team.
Yeah, it got in my own head, I think.
Yeah, because Delap obviously played for Stoke.
Yeah, most known.
Lee Cattermole, you might have played for Stoke at some point after Sunderland got relegated. I'm not sure. But Andy Cole had a brief spell at Sunderland. I think he went from Newcastle directly to Sunderland.
Oh, damn.
Yeah. Manquillo was at Sunderland under Gustavo Poyet, I think.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, and then obviously Jermaine Defoe was at Sunderland.
Yeah.
Lee Cattermole.
Yeah, Jermaine Defoe had a good spell at Sunderland, actually, didn't he? When he was back into his career.
Yeah, no, it was they relied on him a bit like A-Team now.
I bloody love that team. They are
maybe a bit like a Dom Solanke now for Bournemouth or something.
Yeah,
or,
not scoring all the time, but pops up.
Yeah, well, he's actually a bit more prolific than Dominic Solanke. Maybe a bit disrespectful. I'm trying to think of a team, but I can't think of one right now. Hang on, let me think of a team. Someone. Maybe a bit like Dominic Howard-Lewin for Everton when he's fit. Yeah, there we go.
That's
That's
very niche, but a good comparison.
Yeah. But obviously big and small, a bit different. But yeah.
Nice.
So you
That's 1 point there for
extend the
me.
lead to 1.
Damn. So what was it before? So it's actually cut it down.
So it's
It was
10-8.
10. It was 10-8.
Yeah.
It is now 11-10 to me.
Yeah.
So you've closed that gap
Come
down.
on.
This is 2 poor performances in a row for me. I need to step it up. I need to go, not just make my players, do some revision for what could come up in yours as well.
You do that if you want. I'm going to stick to watching the games.
No, I've got more important shit to do. The rest of the podcast doesn't count. It's the 10-minute little segment in the middle.
Yeah, you know what? Liverpool, Newcastle, or Man City, Man United, the London derby. Who cares? Who cares?
It's all about the quiz. It's what everyone wants.
All about the quiz. Wow.
Nice. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, all about the quiz, but we're going to end the quiz there.
Yeah, and go back to the episode. Up next, we have a shock result, potentially, some would say. Forest 1, Chelsea 0 away at Stamford Bridge. Forest to get a very, very good 3 points for them, which could be huge for them going forward. Chelsea, probably you could fairly say, dominated the game in terms of possession and chances. They had an XG of 2.3 compared to Forest's at 0.8. 76% possession for Chelsea, so a lot of the ball, and 21 shots from Chelsea compared to Forest's 7. But it was a really good performance from Forest, a really good defensive performance, and they were able to limit Chelsea's. They had a lot of shots and a few chances, but a lot of them weren't particularly high quality chances. Forest were able to restrict that a lot to outside of the box. Over half of Chelsea's shots were outside the box. And as much as Forest were able to restrict them and put up another really impressive defensive performance, Chelsea's finishing and shooting this weekend was really, really poor. Only 2 of their shots of 21 were on target, which is, if you're a Chelsea fan, that's got to be extremely disappointing. We saw some really good chances that should have been put away, especially the Nicholas Jackson chance from Sterling's putback. It was almost an open goal. All he had to do was get just a soft touch on it, and it probably would have gone in, but he just overstretched. I think it came off his, almost that area between your shin and your boot, and it just went straight over the bar. He must have been absolutely gutted with that one, because it was a very, very... It was a classic chance for a striker, and one that you probably would... I know his finishing potentially hasn't been the best this season, but it's still a chance like that you would have expected him to put away. But he's had a decent season so far, Jackson. He's getting into those positions. It's just getting that final touch and getting those goals where he maybe is lacking so far this season. But fair play to Forest. They had a game plan going in and they implemented it fantastically. They were able to get a goal just after half-time for Elanga, who only came on just before the break. Awani, with a lovely nutmegged pass through to Elanga, finishes it off and 1-0 up. They really would have wanted to restrict the game as much as they could, prevent Chelsea from playing some of their attacking football that we've seen this season, really try and restrict Sterling, who's probably been their danger man so far this season in terms of his runs and dribbling into the box. He only really had that pullback for Jackson and another shot later in the game were his only dangerous decisions. I think part of that was we saw Ola Aina really tuck inside a lot more. Normally he's someone you could expect to be wide, maybe looking at defending their other fullback, Gusto on this occasion. But we really saw him tuck in, and I think that double up of their left-sided centre-back and Aina really restricted Sterling, meant he had to go through a lot more bodies than we would maybe expect. We didn't really see that on the right side, and I think that makes it quite clear that it was a deliberate decision from Cooper to have Aina tuck in to restrict Sterling as much as possible, which gave Enzo Fernandez a little bit more space and Chilwell also a little bit more space. But I think Forest would have known that and would have been happy to sacrifice that based on how Sterling's been playing and restrict him, and it did work. It prevented Chelsea from getting some really clear chances. I think on another day, Chelsea will look back and think if they could have just had a bit better finishing, a few more shots, also maybe create some space to have a little more time to shoot. Quite a few of their shots were rushed, blocked shots, and a lot of that was from the Forest pressure. And it was another really solid defensive performance from Forest. I think at the start of the season, I really did underestimate them. When we were doing our joint prediction, when I went away and did my own, I actually predicted Forest this season that they would be relegated, and I think I'm already starting to backtrack on that. They have looked Really, really good. I know they've lost Brennan Johnson in the back end of the transfer window, but to be honest, I don't think that's going to be as much of a loss for them as it may have seemed a couple of weeks ago. I think if Elanga can make that left wing position his own, he seems to be coming on a lot and playing really well. With Gibbs White and Awani playing as well as he is, they can really push on and get a good season so far. And the next game to break down some more goals: Liverpool 3, Aston Villa 0. This was, for me, I've been saying it quite a lot this season, and Mev has been saying he's maybe not been as convinced as I am, whether he's being a pessimistic Liverpool fan or he knows more than me and I'm chatting absolute rubbish. I think Liverpool have looked really strong at times this season, and I think this was the first game that we saw this for the whole 90 minutes. I think they've really dominated this game, and I was really impressed by their attacking output and their attacking unit. It was an XG of 2.4 for Liverpool compared to Villa's 0.7, 64% of the ball for Liverpool and 17 shots to 9. It was a great start for Liverpool, about as good as they could have wanted. Szoboszlai with a really lovely finish, and it was such a clean strike of the ball, and I think that's something that we really expect to see from Szoboszlai. He's such a technically good player. I know it's quite a large comparison, but I feel like he is of the ilk of almost like a Kevin De Bruyne. Not in terms of quality, but in terms of play style. Someone who has a really good, clean connection of the ball. Someone who, he's got a decent build. He's very strong. He's very composed. But he's not afraid to get stuck in as well. Someone who can really pick out a pass. And someone, I think, when they pick up the ball in that area, you just know you're always going to get a really clean, solid connection. And yeah, put Liverpool 1-0 up, and that's exactly what they would have wanted. They really would have wanted to get an early start to have Villa sort of step up a little bit more. They know that Villa have had a good attack this season with Diaby, Watkins and McGinn. And I think getting that early goal, making Villa press up, really worked, especially when Liverpool were playing Salah and Nunez this game. It opened up a lot of space for Salah and Nunez to attack once they'd got that early goal, and Villa had to come out a little bit. And we saw that almost straight away. Trent with a lovely over-the-top ball for Salah. Salah to play it into Nunez off the post and off the back of off of Cash for an own goal. It was a really lovely move, and it was that first sort of really quick transition that they maybe missed last season, and it looked like the Liverpool of old a little bit. It had those glimpses of Salah, absolutely blistering pace, a lovely ball from Trent, and a good finish in the end. We saw that at the end of the Newcastle game last week. It's exactly what they would have wanted Nunez to get that spacing behind, because that's where he really thrives, and he had another really good game today. Unfortunately for Liverpool, they did still look a little bit shaky at the back at times. I know they're obviously missing Van Dijk and Konate, and a partnership of Matip and Gomez isn't amazing, but they still put up a good performance. They still look quite vulnerable when they lose the ball in the midfield. They don't have many defensive players there. They're playing McAllister as a 6, which I think can work if you're playing against a low block especially. But I think a team like Aston Villa, who are a really good quick transitional team, it could have been a worry that if they pick up that ball in the midfield, there's no defensive cover. Or even if they pick up the ball out wide and start to bring it in, whether Cash and Digne sort of bring that ball in, there's not too much defensive cover in terms of Jones, McAllister and Szoboszlai. But luckily for them, they weren't actually punished for it this week. Villa, they didn't play bad, but they didn't really get much chance to be able to play. I think Liverpool played really, really well, dominated the ball and the game, and just didn't give Villa the opportunity to sort of attack them when they needed to. There was one sort of half chance from McGinn, which was a good bit of play from Diaby after Villa won the ball in that midfield, but they weren't able to make it pay on this occasion. It'd be interesting to see now with Gravenberch on his way to Liverpool. Deal confirmed one of the players that we were talking about 2 years ago as the next big midfielder, the next big Dutch maestro playing in midfield. Someone who went to Bayern Munich, hasn't had the minutes that he would have liked, and has now moved on to Liverpool, and he is that sort of player that they need. They need a lot more midfield cover, and it'd be interesting to see going forward whether he is going to be a starter, whether he is going to be a sort of rotation player. I'm not too sure at the moment. I still think McAllister is probably going to be that 6. But I know Gravenberch can sort of play. He can play both as a 6 and an 8, so there could be quite a bit of interchange between them. Potentially even them playing alongside each other with Szoboszlai a bit further forward, and then that gives them the opportunity for one of the two to move forward and have a bit of interchange throughout the game. Gravenberch is a really good carrier, which will be really exciting to see. They've obviously got McAllister for a passing range, Szoboszlai again for a really good passing range and for sitting on the edge of the box waiting for something to pop out, and Gravenberch being someone who'll be able to pick up that ball and carry it forward for them where needed. In terms of Villa, it was a tough away day for them. There's not many tougher fixtures in the calendar than going to Anfield. But yeah, maybe they came out a little bit too soon. Maybe they were a bit. I hate saying the word naive. I know I say it a lot, but I think when you know you're coming up against Nunez and Salah, I think you do have to push that defensive line back a little bit. And I think they were asking for those long balls over the top, playing the way they did. I think I think they probably would have known that Nunez was going to play, especially after his performance against Newcastle. I think they should have dropped back a little bit. Maybe not convert into a back four, but have their wing backs be a little bit more conservative. It felt like when they went 1-0 down, they really started to push a little bit early, and I think that may have cost them in the end. But it's a tough game. Liverpool played fantastically, and I didn't think there would be too much that Villa could have done anyway. On to the next game, which was Sheffield United 2, Everton 2. This was it's exactly what you want from a relegation battle, which is crazy to say so far early in this season, but it's two teams who have struggled and two teams whose goal is going to be staying up this season. It was really end-to-end. I think a good attacking performance from both sides. I think it was something we haven't seen so far from Sheffield United this season. A bit more of the ball, being able to get forward, get those high crosses in, get those wing-backs involved and get their strikers a bit more of the ball. And in terms of Everton, it was, again, I think a good attacking performance from them in times. They've been a side that I think have got a lot worse results than the way they have played. I know they're getting a lot of stick, a lot of people laughing at Everton, but I still think they've played really well at times this season, and I think it's been a case of converting their chances to goals where they've struggled, which they were actually able to do this game. They were able to put their chances away. But it was actually the opposite end of the pitch, maybe, where they weren't performing well. They looked a bit more open in transition. They looked susceptible to Sheffield United's wing-backs, and I think that's where it really punished them. But overall, in terms of the game, it was an XG of 1.2 for Sheffield United and 2.6 for Everton. A little disclaimer in terms of XG on this one. I think it's a great metric, but I think this game is a really good example of its shortcomings, possibly. The first Doucouré goal for Everton, he had two shots essentially from 3 yards out. The first one was saved and the second one was put in the net. Overall, that combined for an XG of 1.7 for Everton. So if you take away one of those, it was very even in terms of XG, around sort of 1.6 for Everton, 1.2 for Sheffield United. Everton 55% possession and 13 to 16 shots. Sheffield United to Everton. So it's a very close game overall. So as I was saying, Doucouré got that first goal from the corner, and then we saw Sheffield United get a really nice cross into the box into McBurney, who laid it off beautifully for Cameron Archer on his debut for Sheffield United to score his first goal for them. And it was a really lovely finish. It was exactly the sort of play that I think Sheffield United we need to see a little bit more of this season. I think they, obviously playing at home against one of the weaker sides in the league, they were able to get forward and get those wing-backs high and then get those strikers involved in the play, which was really great to see. And then their second, it was Cameron Archer again, picked up the ball in that left half space, curled it in off the post, and unfortunately it came back off Pickford's back. But I think it was a deserved goal because it was a really nice move from Archer and a good finish. We then saw Everton come back on the break through Patterson, who maybe hasn't had the best start to the season. Hasn't got really too much involved in the attacking play, but it was really good to see him get forward and put in the ball for Danjuma to score. And as I was saying, it was a game where Everton were actually able to put their chances away. They did create some really good chances in the last games, but weren't able to. And this game they were able to get 2 goals, which I think they've really needed. And I think part of that potentially... He didn't score, but Beto, I think, looked really strong. He was a really good outlet for them. He was someone who was really confident in picking up that ball and driving forward, as well as spinning in behind where needed. He was really, really quick, looked really, really strong, and I was really impressed by his game. He had 6 out of 9 dribbles, 9 out of 15 overall duels, and 3 tackles. It was someone who I think he's got that starting position for Everton on his own now, with Danjuma pushed out wide to the left. And I think that is enough quality to probably push Everton on. Now they've got the first few goals under their belt. Hopefully that'll be good for their confidence. And there was a bit of a crazy end to the game as well. Pickford with a triple save almost. Sheffield United almost came in and stole all 3 points. Pickford tipped the first one onto the bar, then another onto the post before kicking a third one away. It was another really impressive performance from Pickford. He saved them a lot last season, and it seemed like he did it again this day. He protected that point for them, which they seemed they may have desperately needed so far. Both teams, I think it was a lot stronger compared to their previous games than we've seen. Maybe not as great defensively, but I think the sacrifice of that to get their attacking confidence and get a bit more of a game plan was definitely a good thing for both teams, and a well-deserved point for each. The next game we are going to be looking at was another goal-filled game. There's so many goals this week and so many goals. Was Palace 3, Wolves 2. I think both teams, again, it was another game where I think both teams played really well. The result potentially could have gone either way. Palace perhaps maybe a little bit more dominant, especially playing at home, and looked really strong again, but it was 16 shots for Palace, 12 for Wolves, so it was very even. Wolves actually had a little bit more of the ball with 57% possession. And I think Palace started off looking really dangerous. Eberechi Eze, again, had another fantastic game. He is quite clearly their sort of talisman at the moment. He had 90% pass completion, 3 shots, all on target, a goal, 3 out of 5 dribbles, 8 out of 13 ground duels and 4 tackles. So not only is he playing that creative number 10 role, he is really putting in the defensive shift as well. And not only in terms of a pressing sense, when he's pushing through on that front line against the Wolves defence and lower block midfield, he's also doing that when Wolves are coming at him, which I think for modern number 10s is such a key aspect of their game. He really, because obviously a lot of teams aren't actually playing technically with 10s. He is more of an 8 playing in a 4-3-3. And to be that sort of creative, really attacking 8, you do still need at times to sit back and play defensive, and he has that. He seems to have so many different skills under his locker and is becoming a really complete player for Palace. And I think he has really shone with Elise, not being there, and now Zaha, being injured, and Zaha having left the club in the summer. It's really enabled him to shine and become the main man for Palace at the moment. Yeah, Palace started looking really, really dangerous. They got off to a good start, and they have got off to a good start this season. I think they've played really well so far this season. They obviously had the win against Sheffield United. They did lose at home to Arsenal, but I think, again, they put on a really strong display there and were maybe unlucky to not get anything out of that game. And then they had a draw against Brentford, who we all know are a really good side and can be a tough side to play at times. Edouard was able to get a brace. He's looked pretty strong this season, I would say. He maybe the last season or two maybe hasn't been as good as we were expecting when they first signed him. He wasn't getting sort of consistent minutes. There was a lot of rotation with Mateta and Ayew also playing up front at times. But now Ayew has been pushed out to the wing, and he's sort of made that striker position his own now at Palace. He's started all games this season, and he was able to get a brace this game, which was really good. He finished both 2 really good moves that he finished really well, I thought. Matheus Cunha was also able to get a goal this game, which I think he has deserved so far this season. He has been one of Wolves' strongest players, and again, someone that we hadn't seen the best of last year, definitely. He's really stepped up this year. He's playing that sort of role, just sitting in behind the striker, where he's able to control the game. He's able to pick up the ball and drive the team forward. And I was really happy to see him get a goal, as well as Hwang, who came off the bench and got a header from a set piece. He has now got 2 goals off the bench this season. It's going to be interesting to see whether he is going to start in the striker position. Fabio Silva has played well, but really struggled to put the ball in the net so far this season, whereas Hwang has almost done the opposite. He hasn't had the game time to put on a mesmerising performance, but has been able to put the ball in the net really well. I think there was quite a lot of space in the Wolves midfield in this game, which I think is where Palace were really able to control the game when they did have the ball. I know they had less of the ball, but I think when they did have it, they looked a lot more dangerous and a lot more direct than Wolves. And I think part of that was the way that Wolves were set up. They had their wingers really, really pushing high, Neto and Sarabia. I don't think particularly they're the best pressers and best defensive wingers possible. And then especially when you've got that and also Semedo pushing up from right back, I think it left Wolves quite open at times. And I think that's where Palace were really able to punish them. It was quite surprising to see that from Wolves, especially playing away from home. But Wolves have played really well this season. I understand they want to keep that up and keep playing, and they know if they keep playing as well as they have, despite not getting the results, that those points and goals will come. But it just felt like this game, it was just gave Eze and Edouard and also Lamina a lot of space to push forward and drive forward, and that's where they got their goals. Really strong performance from Palace. Been really impressed so far with this season, and I'm excited to watch more of them, especially watch more of Eze. And our penultimate game this weekend is Brentford 2, Bournemouth 2. This was a really attacking performance from both sides, especially Brentford, who finished with an XG of almost 3 off 21 shots and 61% possession. Brentford were a funny one this game. I think that I wouldn't say that they deserve to win, because I don't think a lot of their sort of chances weren't like really, really clear-cut chances. They maybe had 2 or 3 clear-cut chances, but a few of them were just didn't feel quite clinical enough in this sense, and it felt like that Bournemouth were almost going to steal this game and win it on the break. We saw the game starting with Jensen with a really smart free kick, caught out Neto at the near post, which Hawkeye ruled to be over the line, and it was given, and it was a really nice free kick, and it got them off to a really good start. Sharda then hit the post after a really nice little run, and tried to curl it round, and it came off the post, which was one of those chances where it wasn't a super clear-cut chance, but just lacked that sort of clinical finish. And that's where Bournemouth were able to break. They were able to punish Brentford not taking these chances early on, and actually were able to go 2-1 up. It was Solanke on the break and Lewis Potter coming off the bench to find David Brooks, who put them 2-1 up. Sorry, I've just got my notes completely messed up there. Lewis Potter does not play for Bournemouth. He plays for Brentford. It was a Henry mistake, and Tavernier came on and played it through into Brooks, who scored and put them 2-1 up. But throughout the game, it was just Brentford they hit the woodwork a few times. Wissa hit the post after a nice little move from Brentford on the transition, and it was Lewis Potter who he had their best chance of the game for Brentford. He was about 3 or 4 yards out, and I don't know how he seemed to miss. It seemed harder to miss, but he was able to hit the far post off a chance. And yeah, in the end, it was Bournemouth who were 2-1 up with going into stoppage time before Mbeumo was able to break and put in finish nicely for a late equaliser to get them a point. I think Brentford did deserve a point probably on the whole of the game, but Bournemouth did really well to be able to break when they did and transition when they did, which is maybe not how we would have expected them to play this season. Obviously, it being an away game, and against a good side like Brentford, they're not going to be super high press. They're not going to be expecting to have a load of the ball. But I think that they had a good game plan, and I think that's something that maybe Bournemouth had missed in the first few games. They'd had played really well, but not got the results and the goals when they would have expected them. They had some decent possession, good passing play. But I think in this game they had a really sensible setup, and I think they had found their balance this game. When they did have the ball, they kept it really well, and when they had the opportunity to press on Brentford and try and win that back, then they did. They didn't look super open. They had a decent block, not too low, sort of a decent mid block when they needed to. Brentford did have a few more chances, but I think it was a more mature performance from Bournemouth, I would say, and I think that's something they are starting to develop. I know Areola wants to play that possession-based high press, but I think this was a good medium ground for them this game, and I think if they have that same setup away from home against the better sides in the league, then we could see them, and we nearly saw them this week win 2-1. But Brentford, great character to be able to come back in a frustrating game where they did hit the woodwork so many times, and able to get a point, which was well deserved. Both sides I think still looking fairly strong. Bournemouth, I think now that I have seen that performance where they've shown a bit more defensive solidity and not committed too many men forward and looked too vulnerable. And Brentford still just looking strong. And Buemo with another goal. He's now on 4 goals for the season. He's really stepping up. And that front three of Wisser and Schade has looked really nice as well. And on to our final game this season. Blimey, not yet. Our final game this week, which was Luton 1, West Ham 2, the Friday night fixture, and the first fixture at Luton's ground after their work has been completed. And it was a much better performance from Luton. It was than their last 2 games. Obviously, this is only their 3rd game with their initial home leg, which had to be postponed because their stadium wasn't ready. So this was only their 3rd game this season, but it was a much better performance, I thought, overall. West Ham did dominate the ball with 61% possession, but I think that probably hindered them, actually, if anything. I know we've seen West Ham a lot. They have sat back and really been a transitional breaking team this season, and they almost had to completely change their game plan. I said it last week that Paqueta is probably going to be the one who maybe would thrive under a more possession-based system, and he did seem to in this game. He had a good game, and he was that main player for them. He was able to create a few chances, and he was able to actually create that first chance that West Ham scored from, which was a cross into Bowen. He was able to pick up the ball on the edge of the box and put in a really nice cross into Bowen at the back post, who finished it well. Yeah, it didn't seem that West Ham created too many high-quality chances. I think they were able to move the ball around the box, and I think Luton had a much better defensive setup this week. I think those narrow fullbacks, the narrow wing-backs, actually worked well for them against West Ham. West Ham had a lot of crosses into the box, but I think it was only one of their crosses was actually accurate, which was the one that they scored from. They had a lot of crosses going into the box, which Luton were able to deal with fairly easily. Anderson had a really good game in that middle of their centre backs, able to clean up where needed, and kept West Ham fairly quiet. Especially, it was a strong start to the season for West Ham. Saying as quiet as they kept them, they did eventually still go 2-0 up, and it was, of course, a James Ward-Prowse corner into Kurt Zouma and to put them 2-0 up. And I think that's a combination we are going to be seeing a lot of this season. He seems to have been the perfect player for West Ham, one who fits into their system fantastically. He's someone who, when they are sitting back and breaking, which I think it will be their sort of main game plan this season, he is someone who is able to pick up the ball and produce a pass that creates that attack. And then once they have got that ball up into the pitch, if they're not able to create something from it, win a free kick, win a corner, he's exactly that man they need to get their tool players up front and get the goals. Luton were able to get their first Premier League goal of the season through Anderson. It was a little too late. It was, I think, in 92nd, 93rd minute, and the game, unfortunately, was already over by then. West Ham were just protecting what they had and were able to keep them out for the remaining few minutes. It was a much better performance from Luton, I thought. I think they showed a lot more progression. They were, obviously, them being 1-2 goals down, they did still have to come out, but I think it was a good thing to see. I think it would have given them a bit more sort of confidence that they can hold on to a game, get it sort of to half-time without conceding. I know they did in this game, but I think the way that they played, they can get their future games, keep it sort of low-scoring 0-0 into half-time and then start to progress in that second half, which we saw in this game, and create a few chances. We haven't seen them create too many chances so far this season, but I think this was definitely their best performance by a while. Whether this is due to the home crowd, it could be having a massive impact, and it's somewhere where it might give them a really big advantage this season. But I think that's probably still yet to see. But it was promising signs for Luton. Obviously, still not getting the result. And West Ham, it was a solid performance. Not as good, I would say, as the last few games, but still a really good 3 points away from home. And it's put them on 10 points out of 12. They're now in 4th place in the league. Hopefully, they can keep that up and keep going, because I think it's a really good thing to see a team who play like West Ham have a bit more respect for how they play. I know it's seen probably by a few people as sort of long ball, old-fashioned football, not pretty football, but I think the way West Ham have been playing this season is just as attractive football as sort of your high press, high possession based game. I think when you see the way they have clearly really good setup on set pieces, I think so much work must go into that to have. Not a lot of work has to go into it when Ward-Prowse is delivering it, but when they have that and the work they are putting into set pieces, it's such a good output for them. And it's someone else who's got a lot of praise for that in the last season was Brentford. They are someone who are really key on their set pieces and where they get a lot of their goals. And I think West Ham are also doing that this season. And I think when you see them break the way that they do, it's quick, it's accurate passing, it's really confident dribbling, it's exploiting the weaknesses in teams that you're coming up against. And I think that's really interesting to see, as opposed to just playing to your own team's strength every week. They're really, really going for the other team's weaknesses, and I really hope they can keep that up and have a good season under David Moyes, because I think he's done a really, really good job. And that was game week 4 of the Premier League. All 10 games done and dusted as we go into an international break. 4 games into the season now. And Man City are on top as always. A few teams not too far behind in terms of who have we got behind on 10 points. It's Liverpool, Spurs, West Ham and Arsenal all sitting not too far behind, 2 points behind. And it's been a really great start to the season so far. I think doing this podcast with Mevin has just made me love football even more, and it's made me watch a lot more football. It's made me watch a lot more teams that I wouldn't have probably watched as much in previous seasons, and it's just been a really great start to the season, a lot of great football, and I'm just hoping all these goals can stay. So much to talk about, so many goals. But yeah, in terms of all these goals scored, it seems a lot of teams, I think, are starting to do this high press, this high possession based game. They are sort of, I think that's how the sort of trend is at the moment, is to play this high possession, high press. And I think that's where we're seeing a lot of goals, is because I think it's probably a double-edged sword. I think a lot of teams are winning that ball higher and getting more goals themselves. But also when teams are doing that, they are looking a little bit more vulnerable at the back. And I think that sort of goes both ways for a lot of teams. I'd probably say sort of 13 to 14 teams are really trying to play high press, high possession football. And that probably in terms links with the really high price tag for defensive midfielders at the moment. I think a lot of teams sort of pressing high as they are, they need that sort of cover in the in the number 6 role, which is where obviously you're seeing your Caicedos, your Rice, Enzo Fernandez maybe not playing that role so much this season, but that was initially maybe what he was brought in to do. As really good cover, and someone even like Nottingham Forest bringing in Ibrahim Sangare from PSV. He is sort of your example, number 6, someone who's really good at winning and reading that ball. Not a team who do play high possession in terms of Forest, but having someone like Sangare sit in means that they can press high when needed and still have necessary cover. So yeah, hopefully all these teams are sort of still playing that really exciting attacking football, because it's been great to watch, especially as a neutral, sort of seeing how all these teams are adapting and changing, and it's just been a really, really great start to the season, and I'm looking forward to it coming back after the international break. So yeah, thank you everyone so much for listening and for all the support for the start of the podcast. If you're listening on YouTube, please subscribe, like, and leave us a comment down below what you thought of the podcast, what you've enjoyed so far, and what you think we can improve on. And if you're listening on Spotify, please follow and give us 5 stars. It is massively appreciated, and it goes a long way to progressing the pod. Thank you everyone for joining the Football Fellowship and for joining us today. Cheers.